We need like the Kanye inspired remix of that version. Like that little extra drums, like add something extra to it for thumping coming out on a Monday morning. But yeah.
Yes.
Hello. Happy Monday. Good morning. Welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files, the series for anyone who manages people, projects, and processes for a living. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I explore management and leadership topics from the perspective of what not to do.
You know, the fun side. So today we have the tale as old as time. In our episode, we're going to be talking about common leadership mistake of not adjusting to changes that are happening at the business or client level and not adapting to them and basically sticking to your guns and going down the plan you had anyways.
You know, just think of this like a business that has been around for a long time, or and I was thinking, in fact, before we started recording, was talking about like one of the first companies that I worked for, where the manager had a bit of arrogance and told the client, like, you know, you can never replace us. No one can do what we do. And like a month later, like, ended the contract and found a team that could do exactly what we could do. We've always done it this way, so why should we change? We're always talking about having the importance of having a project management methodology, having a consistent, measurable approach to projects. But part of that process should include a regular review of the process. Are we fine-tuning it? Are we adjusting to the changing needs of the business, to the industry, to our customers? You should constantly be looking at the process.
Crazy talk, Christian. Crazy talk.
I know.
Oh my gosh. This has been a recurring theme within our series. It's almost like we'd like talking about change management or something. The idea that it's not about making change for the sake of change, but more learning from kind of what's going on and then being able to take that information and make better choices because of that. And what ends up happening is you're able to implement better projects. You're able to help your clients better. If you take what you've learned and you use that knowledge, that going forward, it's like, I know what my fundamental plan is, but I also know how to make changes as I need to. Then you can stay on track and you can make sure that everything is where it goes, where it's supposed to go. It does what it's supposed to do. You keep everybody on track.
In business school, I became a fan of W. Edwards Deming. I've told you this. I actually wrote a white paper with one of my former professors. We did a paper that we wrote that got into the W. Edwards Deming, what do you call it? The paper. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is.
Letter or whatever.
Yeah. Wow. I just took something that was really cool. Professional achievement.
I did this thing.
I did a thing at this one time. Anyway,
it's a thing.
Yeah, but I can hear his voice in my head. If you don't know who W. Edwards Deming is, then go check it out. He was
kind of a big deal.
Kind of the big deal of the total quality management. He helped after World War II. He helped go and rebuild Japan. Was sent over by the U.S. government to help. And so even to this day, the highest award you can get as a business is the Deming Quality Award.
Yep.
But his voice in my head is optimize the system. And this is idea of even in ongoing operations, you're continually looking for how can we improve this? How do we adjust this? Yes, we're at 99.9%. How can we get to 3 nines, 4 nines? So you're constantly looking at ways to improve because nothing stays the same. Your business rules change, the customer needs change, the skills and capabilities of the people that you're managing because they move on in their career. You got new people in, all of those change. It's almost as if change management is important, Sharon.
You think?
Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit.
Yeah. It should be a great conversation. Let's jump into it. As with every episode, of course, please feel free to comment throughout the episode, share your experiences, any great examples or feedback that we may have missed.
Or scary stories that you want to share.
We love those.
Or therapy moments or pain points, like whatever you want to talk about. It's all good. All right, let's get started with some definitions.
Yeah. So how do you define like clinging to yesterday's playbook? What does that mean to in your mind?
I mean, I think fundamentally at a core level, if you think for 1 second that things don't change and they don't change on a regular basis, then you already are doing this. And I'm going to tell you now, with everything that's happening in AI, it's really making people very aware of how quickly things change because it's kind of in front of their face. But it's not, everybody's like, oh, we don't understand. There's big changes. I'm like, there's always big changes. There always
has been. Right.
Always something changing. And I think that the sooner you can recognize that things change, that you need to change with it, the faster you get away from that. And if you do not have that mentality, then essentially you are clinging to yesterday's playbook.
Yeah. I've long said organizations, companies, teams that are good at change management have a distinct competitive advantage. If you have that built into the DNA of your organization, that you are looking at what's happening here, how do we need to adjust, being ready for that, you're moving forward still with the projects because you can do too much. It's like the whole analysis paralysis, that part of it. Sure, you need to be moving forward, but you can't just look at the way that you've been doing it as the right way. You need to constantly question, is this still the right way to move forward?
Yeah, ultimately, there are those people that learn one thing and they know how to do that one thing for the rest of their career. Or they do it one way and that's the only way it can be done. And no matter where they go or what they work with, it's like the only thing they're capable of doing. And then there's other people who are adaptable, who are like, okay, show me the new way, show me the new things. I'm open to learn. I have a positive attitude. And I think, when we talk about definitions of clinging to the playbook and not changing, in addition, it's not even just not being adaptable. It's that idea of thinking, like you said, this is the only way to do it. And I'm stuck in this kind of rut of being rigid around this is the only way, not even that I know how to do it, but that it can be done.
Yeah. And I want to differentiate from that as well, from like we've talked about in the past, like ticket takers, people like you need to have a certain number, like amount of ticket taker people that are like, tell me what to do and they'll go and get it done. You can hand that stuff off and know, but they don't typically, that profile of employee isn't then going and looking at what's the right thing for the business. What else should I go and do there? They're waiting to get their direction. And when they're done with the list, then they're playing solitaire. And so you have a mix of those people in the team and they have their functions. That's actually not what we're talking, because you have ticket takers that still adjust. And how do I solve this? How do I do these things that you've given me, and can be creative in their approach to that. So I think it is important to understand, clarify the difference between that learned experience and the rigidity of the unwillingness to go and do it a different way. It's like, I wasn't told to go and do it. Like, use your head. That clearly is not working. Stop doing the thing that's not working.
Or worse, I can't do it the way that I've always done it, so I'm just not going to do anything. I've also seen that be a big issue in this is how I do it. And I couldn't do it that way. And I didn't ask for help. I didn't tell anybody. I just didn't do it at all because I don't know how to be adaptable and think outside the box and look for that next thing. I just know that I couldn't do the one thing I could do. So I sat down and I stopped.
Yeah. I just think of that sitting in meetings, and I've done the same thing. We've all done it, where I didn't ask the questions that would have clarified what's being delivered, what's the right approach for this, what's the time frame, what are the expectations around this, all those kinds of things where you feel like, okay, I should already know this, so I'm embarrassed to ask for that.
Yep.
I'd rather have people come back and ask the clarifying question. I mean, I know how my mind works. I mean, with asking directions, and I could have my wife sitting in the passenger seat, and I'd be like, okay, is it the right turn coming up? Yeah, the next right turn. And then the way my mind works and thinking about something, this is the turn. Yes, this is the next right turn. Like, oh, all right, I just want to make sure. But yeah, there's a whole different discussion about traveling with my wife as a navigator.
That is not the topic of today's episode, Christian.
I just like the driving past is like, well, you should have taken that exit. So, hey, you're the navigator. What do you mean is we've passed it? You told me we should have turned right there,
So I do agree with you. And one of the things that I've been my entire life is naturally curious. And so my dad actually used to say that I was a lot like Alice, right? Alice in Wonderland, because he's like, I'm aggressively curious. And this has always just been part of my nature is I really truly am fascinated by people and what they do and why they need to do it and how they do it. And it's really just, I'm just curious. Right. And I think one of the things that is really good, about this is being curious. But I think when people are not curious enough, when, they're just like, I already know what I need to know. I don't need to know anything else. I don't want to add anything to my knowledge. This can impact everything around you for exactly what you said, is that if you go into a meeting and you're just like, whatever information you give me is enough information. I'm not going to be curious about anything else. I'm not going to care that anything else is out there. That's just as much of kind of following that old playbook as anything else, because you're not looking to see if there's any new opportunities. You're just simply, waiting for somebody to tell you what the rules are.
You think about the project and cultural impacts of not being inquisitive, not going and asking those questions, being forthcoming with that information. And again, there's responsibility on the manager, the project manager, the leader in the organization. There's responsibility of the people that are taking up those tasks. Both should ask questions. It's like you learn that lesson about, in the interview process, when you're going through, whether it's HR or the hiring manager or somebody along the way, and they're saying, do you have any questions for me? The answer should never be no. Never.
Yeah, you should always ask a question.
Always have questions for that. Little advice there on the hiring process. But culturally, if you think to that, where an organization where people just go and hey, I'm just doing what my understanding is, and just go and pursue that. I've worked for that. Again, working with, I'll beat up a little bit on past team, but working for the phone company a few years back, and I was continually frustrated by the lack of urgency. And I learned a lot from for myself of being too forceful with people who I was frustrated with. Their lack of urgency, and there's still a right and a wrong way to approach those things. But I mean, that by people not asking questions, I saw this happening in real time. People not asking questions, not clarifying things led to mistakes. It means there were missed opportunities. There were delayed delivery dates. There was poor engagement from the customers. They didn't feel that I didn't feel like this was really important around this. And so then you have the bright and capable employees. They see that culturally. They then become disillusioned. They immediately start looking for another job with another team, going outside of the company for that. Nobody wants to work in that kind of culture. Most people, never say never.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to work in that kind of culture. They want to work in a place that is vibrant and people are excited to be there and are collaborative, and that's what drives engagement and helps everybody improve and learn and execute better.
Well, and I also think, as we're talking about pitfalls, I think one of the major pitfalls is, especially right now, we're seeing a gigantic overlap of generational growth, right? So we're seeing one or two generations begin to retire, well, not begin to, one or two generations actively retiring out of the workforce, and 2 or 3 generations actively beginning their time in the workforce. There's a lot of overlap that's happening. And as new people come in, and it's not even just generationally, but as new people come into the organization, into their role, into your team, what, however you want to put it, there's this kind of idea that they assume, right? They assume that the way that you're doing it is the way that they're going to do it. And I think that when you model as a manager, as a leader, when you model the idea that here is our current plan and here is how we are adaptable, here is how we look for opportunities to be curious, we look for opportunities to change this when we need it, then they will also follow that lead and they will do it. If you do not, if you just say, here's the checklist, do the checklist, they're going to do the checklist and they're not going to have the confidence, the knowledge, the experience to look around that checklist. And they're going to say, well, I did the checklist and I ran into a roadblock, but I didn't know what to do. And so they're not going to be as productive or as efficient, and they're going to be frustrated because the checklist is outdated or the checklist doesn't have what they need. And so from a pitfall perspective, we have to think about the idea that what we model is what we get. And if we don't model adaptability, we don't get adaptability either.
Right. Well, another side of this too is, people that just want to avoid conflict. They want to avoid having those difficult discussions, and they don't want to disrupt the status quo. And it could be in defense of the individuals, the task people, is that you've got a lot of managers that kind of bully them into that. There's some confusion around experience versus relevance for the project. Whether you have the right degree or that you are a certain level within the organization doesn't mean that you can't be the one protecting the bad process. And so you just have to be, like, everybody on every level has to be willing to recognize that something's not working here. Things have changed. We need to do something different. And it doesn't mean that you have an answer for that. It may be that you need to experiment. You may need to bring in outside people to think out of the box. Sometimes it takes it's always frustrating as consultants. Like, we're often brought in, and we usually identify right away that there are people in that existing organization who have been telling the organization for a long time, we need to be doing it this way. And yet we come in as consultants and say, we need to be doing it this way. And they're like, oh, and so they will, that's like, you can never be popular in the town where you grew up. Like, that's just like, everybody knows you, they knows the old you. That's what it's like with companies sometimes.
Well, and I think there's a fine line between authoritarianism and authoritativism, right? So authoritarian and authoritative is that very fine line between you need to lead and you need to lead with enough information and people know what's going on, but you can't force, right? It's that fine line of making sure they have what they need to do it, making sure they understand what the plan is, but giving them that ability to be adaptable within the plan, as opposed to saying you have to do this or you're going to be punished or penalized or whatever. And so people will avoid being adaptable for the sake of avoiding being, rebuked or punished or whatever.
Yeah. I also like another pitfall that I just liked this phrasing that I came up with, the process worship.
Oh,
there
yes.
is like that. Like, we all kneel at the altar of this methodology, that side of it. I've often shared, like, a couple different companies I've worked for where I got budget and I funded PMP certification. So through Project Management Institute, go and do that. I never went and got certified myself. But I did my MBA. That was essentially a project management degree. But I would say to them, like, I want you to learn from this and take the good things from it. I never want to see you attempting to apply all of it all at once as part of that. Like, use what makes sense, learn the skills, have the tools in the tool belt, but recognize that the full process end to end is heavy-handed for 99.9% of the projects out there. So you need to optimize what's outdated, optimize that methodology. You need to adapt to the current conditions.
Yeah. I think it's just, the idea of sometimes we put so much effort into creating the process originally, and then you kind of lock it down and set it in stone because you've put so much investment into creating that process that you mean well, right? You mean well. It's good to have a plan. It's good to have a process. It's good to have all that set up. But I think this whole idea of process worship, I mean, I agree, right? So many people get so worried about how they're doing it and that they're following the right thing because somebody's implemented something they put a lot of effort into, that they forget to think about the fact that, did we bake in the opportunity to change, or are we still doing something that is no longer serving us?
Yeah. So what are your primary strategies for overcoming this issue?
I mean, I think ultimately, like I've said, it's, creating room within the process itself for adaptability. And a lot of people don't want to talk about this because they're like, no, that'll happen naturally. I'm like, it doesn't happen naturally. Mm-hmm. If you don't bake in the process opportunities to understand what's not working, to understand when things are changing, to understand when people have feedback, mm-hmm. then you won't do it. You will do what's on the checklist. And if nothing on the checklist says check to see if there's things that need to be changed, reviewed, or edited, you won't ever do that. So I think most importantly is build that directly into your process.
Yeah. I think my earliest learning about this process was working for EDS in the early 90s and being part of, with my organization, with my manager, who was an excellent manager, and she introduced me to the concept of later termed the systems planning, that kind of thing, where we're going through and looking at, here the engineering organization, which was massive, and I was on the BA team. Here's where we're applied. Here's the projects that are coming that we know about it. Here's what we're going to structure. We move things around. So planning for the new year, they would go into that exercise and say, what's the best way? And they would look at relationships, who's getting along, who's the best fit for, who has the best experience on the types of projects, move that kind of stuff around. But it's a similar function. I did that at the phone company. I did that at Microsoft. I've done that since then with some of the companies that I've worked with, where you go through and you structure and say, what is the right way? What's not working? What's working? How can we do more of this? How do we act more like, take this great example of this? How do we do more of that? Being reflective, as you said, build it into the process. At the very least, on an annual basis, be looking at that process. I would hope that it's more frequent than that. Yeah. And there also needs to be safe space to experiment, to try things.
Yes. I would say one of my most favorite places that I've ever worked in terms of talking about strategies to get past this is I worked at a global engineering firm that had a Six Sigma program. So speaking of Deming, right? We had a Six Sigma program, and it was designed to be a part of everybody's job, like a small part of everybody's job. And we regularly met where we could identify what are projects and processes that need to be reviewed, that need to be audited, that need to be edited. There was a safe space for us to potentially try out things that had ROI that had been defined. But we regularly met, we reviewed the opportunities just like you would in a sales organization, but we reviewed the opportunities for improvement, for continuous improvement. And it was a really neat opportunity to see how a strategy like that could just constantly make things better and better and better and better and better and better. And then the really neat thing is we got rid of things that weren't working. We added things, new things that were working. We improved things that were existing, and we rewarded the people who participated in that.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I saw, I think, is a great strategy. I saw it with clients that working in the financial services. I had a good friend, a couple friends that did trainings around Six Sigma for financial institutions. So they worked with a bunch of the largest banks and credit card companies and companies like E-Trade and Schwab and a bunch of those others, and doing these practices, but was establishing rewards and recognitions around the people that had the certifications of completed projects that met the standards, that had been audited and been through that. And so they had like their gold star program around, like, if you're audited and you pass the audit the first time, rewarded slightly different than one that had found issues but then retooled and was able to, like, everybody needs to pass the audits, but those that had it down, had the process, had it documented, had it auditable right up front, a certain reward there. And it did something to the culture. It changed how that organization went and looked at. They thought about documentation. They thought about process. Has it been updated? Is everybody trained? Are we up to speed? Is the communication between all those things? So it can be very healthy. That was in finance, you want to have that orderly approach. Maybe it's a little more dynamic, but what does that look like? That kind of rewarding for adaptability, rewarding people, recognizing people for going through this review and restructuring and cleanup process as a project in itself.
Yeah. And there's different ways that different places do it. It's everything from, you get good scores on your annual feedback, all the way to, in this case, we did an annual award celebration, which I really loved, because I think in life, you like, when you're a kid, you like get awards for soccer or t-ball or whatever. And then you go to school and you get awards for, the different things that you do. And then you go to college and maybe you get an award for something you've done, and you get the little tassels and all of that kind of stuff. And then you go into the work world and everybody forgets. Yeah. They're like, you get a paycheck. You get a paycheck. Like,
you're saying, hand out participation medals and ribbons.
You know what? At the end of the day, I'm telling you, when we talk about rewards, I worked at a place once that one of the team leads was really struggling with getting people to meet a certain thing. And they created these little paper certificates that they printed on their own printer, right? And every week he would do a little ceremony and he would say, here's the top achiever for the week. And he would hand the little certificate before we started on Mondays. And after a few weeks, it's kind of crazy. Like, people were going gaga over this one little piece of paper to get recognized once a week, right? And it really taught me a lot about the fact and the value of reward, because I don't think we really do enough of it in our corporate lifestyles. Yeah. And so I've seen it go all the way from that simple little piece of paper all the way to a full-blown award ceremony. And it really doesn't matter what you do, but I will tell you, I don't think we get enough recognition in general day to day. And I think people are hungry for that. So I think it's a great way to strategically to kind of, deal with getting more of what you want.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of when it comes to best practices for this. I think that having recognition, recognizing and rewarding, separate things. So recognition can be, sometimes that's all you need to do, is the fact that people have gone through and identified a change that needs to be made. I mean, when you hear about something like this, it tends to be like somebody made a suggestion through the suggestion box for something that now increased productivity by X% or efficiency by this percent. Those are great things. But if you're recognizing the efforts of people that are trying to make improvements, that's one thing. Having a culture, I think that fits in with the next bullet, which is continuous learning. You need to promote that curiosity, make it part of the tradition of the organization, that people go in and try things. They're not afraid to try things. In fact, you make sure that there's time allotted for that. Build it into their job descriptions so that they're reminded that, hey, I need to be thinking about this. And in fact, if you made that a facet of everyone's job description, where you could ask them in those one-on-ones or the quarterly review or the mid-year, the annual review of, what did you do, or did you find, change? What changes were made because of this? And I don't know, figure out the right way to do this so that's meaningful, not just I went and, updated the documentation. Like,
what did you do that had verifiable ROI?
Right. But other parts of that, other best practices, change the communication cadence. So it's, I love this is because I ask the questions, is the why behind. I'd never, as a child, I remember in second and third grade, something being explained to me. I said, well, why is it like this? Like, well, it just is. Like, nope.
Not enough.
Not satisfied with that answer. And so you should, as a manager, as a leader, be able to explain the why behind the directional changes. Here's what's going on because of these customer demands, because of our investors that we're doing this, or the market has shifted. You need to have the reasons behind that. Then there needs to be, there's other things. There's cross-generational dialogue. So making sure that, and this has always been a struggle of people that are getting ready to retire and passing the baton over, make sure that it's just not like, I had this personal experience. I've shared it many times before, but when I started the phone company, I took over a bunch of projects from this one guy who handed me this massive 3-ring binder. And it was frustrating that I'd be digging through. It wasn't well organized. This is somebody who has spent some time as a technical writer. I was like, to be able to find this stuff. And I'm constantly coming back over to him, asking him, like, this process, I'm trying to do it. I can't find it. And he'd come over, flip through. It's right there in this workflow. I'm like, yeah, that's missing everything around it to know that that's what it is. And so I started handwriting notes in there. So make sure that there's cross-generational dialogue to be able to share the institutional knowledge and make sure people are asking questions both directions. That needs to be part of that so that we're all iterating on the methodologies, that it's just part of our culture that we are asking those questions. Are we missing something? Is this still the right way to do things?
Yeah, I think that's why knowledge management is such a big important part of this is, not the idea of knowledge management is understanding what we do, why we do it, and how we can pass that knowledge on, that tacit knowledge on to anybody new that joins the organization.
Yeah. Thinking about calls to action. What do you tell, like, what's a call to action to a project manager?
I would definitely say, understand what it is that you are doing, to your point of why, right? Know your why. So what is it that you're doing? Why are you doing it? What goals are you aligning to? And so that when something changes or when something needs to change, you can understand the request for that change or the need for the change and respond to that change in a much quicker fashion than if you don't know why you're doing something. Because if you just do something for the sake of doing it, because everybody's always done it this way, then if something comes up, you don't know why you should change either. So I think it's just really important to understand that and regularly review that.
I think one of the most undervalued tools is the postmortem, the retrospective for that. And that is a valuable tool for PMs to be able to go in and say, it's not just about, commenting on what went wrong. And that's a mistake that leaders make in multiple organizations where it was just nag fest. It was all negative on that. Be like, okay, how are we learning about how to improve if all you're doing is using this as a way to beat up on the people of what went wrong? That's not what it's about. It's about, okay, here's what didn't work. Why here, if we make this change, this will help. Not all of the problems are due to human error. There are other reasons why things happen. So you need to have that retrospective, and you need to make it productive, like you said, by focusing on why this happened. What can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again, or that we manage that potential risk going forward?
Yeah, and I think ultimately, we've talked about this kind of throughout today, but being okay, not just being okay with change, but really embracing and championing the opportunity for any time there's a change needed, encouraging that change to happen if there is value, right? We don't want to change just to change, but if there's value, sometimes change is scary, sometimes change is hard, sometimes change is difficult. But if the investment in the change will bring enough ROI, then get on it, because the faster you do it, the faster you're going to get the good stuff.
It's such a competitive strength that when leaders recognize, like, we're going to be good at change. We want to be fast. We want to be flexible. We want to be smart. We'll be structured in our approach. But when we need to pivot, we'll pivot. When we need to adapt to this, we'll adapt. That's the right approach. That
Agreed. Sends
the right signals through the organization.
Yep.
Yeah, if you're stuck in an organization that's in kind of a rut, I think it's to have that outside perspective. It's always good to say, all right, let's just stop here for a moment. If we were knowing what we know now about where we are, how would we approach this? It may not be that you can start over and just go that other direction, but where would we start? Where would we do this today? I mean, that's a great post-mortem discussion.
Yep.
But you can ask that question at any time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I would say another, you talked about the retrospective, but I think another tool that is vastly overlooked is the gap analysis, which is the idea of understanding where are you, where do you want to be, and how do you want to get there?
Yeah. Well, Sharon, I think that's it. We've said a lot. There's a lot jam-packed in these episodes.
Yep.
But please be sure to follow us and subscribe. The recordings will be available, of course, out on YouTube. You'll see it out in the blog, through social. So we'd love to have you following us over on our new YouTube home. And we're building this thing out for the long term. And excited to get back to, and we'll see you, I guess, next Monday. Do it again, maybe. Yeah.
Tell your friends, send them a link, share the wealth, and we'll see you next time.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.